Greetings, everybody. This is Christopher Messina coming at you as ever from the beautiful beaches of the last free state in America, Florida. Joining me in the studios today is Dena coming to us from New York, the People's Socialist Republic of Hokistan, as I call it. She is a lawyer and now very ardent activist for Jewish causes in the wake of the madness following October 7th, 2023. Dena, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. How are you doing?
First of all, thank you for having me. I'm doing great. Great as can be, as well as could be expected under these trying times. I'm just trying to navigate the new world that Jews live in post October 7th. I'm a lawyer, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm all those things, and I call myself a reluctant activist because plenty of people are doing it, but not enough. And I just really couldn't hold back. Again, if you would have told me on October 6th that I would be writing on social media about Israel and anti-Semitism, I would have said you're crazy, because there's been plenty of terrorism in Israel over the years. There's anti-Semitism. I don't go to social media to talk about such things, but this time is different. To me, this is an emergency situation, and your regularly scheduled programming is being interrupted, and
by existential dread and the threat of annihilation.
Exactly. It's sort of can't believe that there are plenty of Jews out there, or at least it seems to me, who are not overly concerned for their own safety and for the safety of the people in Israel.
To say the least, can I break in, since you and I spoke last week? Last year, I wrote about Hollywood assholes holding up, all wearing a pin that celebrates the lynching of two Jewish young men in 2000 in Ramallah. And whether they're too stupid or not, I don't care. They wore it. Didn't think they could outdo themselves, but talk about Jews bringing down hell upon themselves. Who is this lunatic anti-Zionist Jew that faked all this crap for a documentary that makes Spinal Tap look factual? And they gave this asshole an Academy Award. It is. So first off, may I say, and then I want your reaction to that. Can this finally put paid to the idea that Jews control Hollywood? I mean, really, this idiot manufactured this lie about these peaceful Palestinians who, in fact, spend their time taunting the IDF and then only filming the IDF's rather rational reaction to such taunting. And these clowns gave this atrocity an Academy Award for Best Documentary. It's beyond insane.
It's horrible. It's horrifying, actually, and it's horrifying that the reaction overall is more or less a yawn. Now, as far as the Jews are concerned, being involved in all of this anti-Zionist and real Jew hatred itself, there is a concept, I'm sure you're familiar with it, of the self-hating Jew. And yeah, I mean, there are many.
Back to Josephus in the Roman Empire.
Right, exactly. And it's a phenomenon, I think, that's unique to the Jewish people, because I don't see other groups. I certainly don't see Palestinian Arabs, beating their chest about Palestinian atrocities or being critical in any way. And Jews, because, and that this is not from me, this is Richard Landis, a historian who wrote a book all about the media and anti-Israel bias called "Can the Whole World Be Wrong?" And of course the answer is yes.
Yes.
Can the whole world be wrong? But
that was true back in 2025, 2021 as well. Nothing's new.
Right. But the stakes are higher now. And so Jews, I guess, are introspective, and we go back a long way, and our relationship with God is one of sort of reprimand and introspection and we're hard on ourselves. We want to do better. We don't want others to be persecuted the way we were persecuted, but it can and has turned into a sickness where in either out of a sense of overwhelming guilt or an overwhelming need for acceptance by the non-Jewish world, Jews have just become our own worst enemy. We are not just fighting anti-Semitism from non-Jewish spheres, but from our own, from within. And that is, I think that's just an illness. And you could see.
Yeah, I'm curious your thoughts on how much of that is a particularly American illness, right? Because you certainly have generations, especially from what I call the draft dodger generation, the brats born to the boomers, who actually, the brats born to the greatest generation that fought a war that let the boomers have the best lives ever. In thanks for that, they turned out to be the biggest brats on the planet that have plunged my grandchildren into debt. More on that later, different show. But I see that everywhere. I see, there's the idea it's not the self-hating Catholic, it's the lapsed Catholic. It's, this I'm going to repudiate everything my parents did. It's a spoiled brat routine that came out of, the Vietnam protests, in my opinion. So how much more of that do you think is true anywhere around the world, or as the U.S. has been almost uniquely accommodating to ethnic groups of all kinds, and therefore Jews were able to blend in here a lot better than anywhere else, and they began to mistakenly believe that the world thought they'd blended in. In fact, as we found out, and those of us who never believed that nonsense, it's slapping people in the face, and instead of blaming the outside world for that, oddly they turn around and say, well, it must be something we did, which is like blaming the rape victim for the attack.
Exactly. So that's so interesting that you bring up other countries. What I think is that the phenomenon is fairly unique to two places, the United States and Israel. You have a huge contingent of, I'll call them far left, just for lack of a better description, who consider them, first of all, there are many who consider themselves to be post-Zionist. So they don't really think of Israel as a homeland for the Jews anymore, which was the whole purpose of the enterprise was to provide a homeland for the Jews. They want really a secular democratic entity. And just a great example is, and I'm sorry I didn't brush up on my names, one of the editors of Haaretz.
It's the worst. They might as well just walk through the streets killing Jewish children. They're
it's Al
horrifying.
Jazeera, basically. He was on the side with Mehdi Hassan in a debate against, it was Douglas Murray and Natasha Hausdorff, and of course they lost. But there you had on the Palestinian side, the pro-terror side, an Israeli Jew. And the far left in Israel is extremely dangerous, I believe. You have...
They're dangerous everywhere. That's their nature. All they can do is destroy.
Right.
No leftist has ever built anything.
No.
All they do is kill and destroy and cry and bitch like little children. It is a childish, puerile belief system because the only belief is, I don't like daddy. There's no other belief. They have no other beliefs about anything. Because if they did, those of us who know what we believe and are willing to defend it in the public square are happy to come have the debate. But what does the left do? They invented censorship, cancel culture, deplatforming. So when they heard something their precious little ears can't take, they have to use the temporary might they had running social media platforms to silence everybody.
Right.
Because they have no arguments. They have no ability to cogently debate a point because they are completely devoid of a point, aside from I'm screaming at daddy because I'm a perpetual adolescent.
Yeah.
And I think I'm being generous with that estimation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's probably worse here in the United States.
Yeah.
That's my impression.
It's the luxury to be useless fat people. No one else does.
Right.
It's bizarre. And yeah, it's as who was a great writer said, there are no atheists in foxholes.
Right.
When you got missiles flying and lice crawling you, and it's the front in France in 1917, and any moment you watch your friends get blown to pieces, really hard to argue for the non-existence of God.
Right,
But
exactly.
anyway, so what's the biggest thing you saw? You're in New York. I'm in Florida, where the sheriff's department would love it if I were to beat the living crap out of a Fakestinian who made noises at my children. We'd be delighted for that. There would be no question about it. You try to wear a keffiyeh face mask and protest here, they will. The police department will break your face before they take you to re-education camp. I mean, prison. Uh, but in New York, Columbia, Barnyard, NYU. It's madness. How has New York allowed itself to allow these maniacs to march in the streets calling for the death of Jews, and no one does anything? Why is
Right,
this happening?
right. Well, New York City is pretty far left, and enterprise. The leader is not, maybe not everybody, but certainly Alan Bragg's office, I would say,
Oh,
is not looking to criminalize any anti-Semitic type of crime. So that's one issue. I will say that I didn't take it seriously years ago, but this has been going on at places like Columbia. My One of my children is a graduate of Barnard, and this was going on back when 10 years ago when she was a
right.
student. She knew, and she says everybody knew, you don't study Middle Eastern studies. You don't take Middle Eastern studies classes at Barnard or Columbia. It was just a given. You don't do it. But now that it's become after October 7th, when shockingly, almost as if they were waiting in the wings, the pro-terror groups on campus just exploded and it became dangerous for Jews.
Yeah.
Now, the rest of us, myself included, I'm starting to notice uh, what's what's going on in the colleges, and yeah, it's still a very slow process to get law enforcement to do anything about the dangerous behavior of some of these protesters. Finally, I guess Barnard expelled a couple of people, which they never would have done last year.
Right.
Someone, a Columbia graduate student, we just heard is being,
Oh yeah, Tom Homan went and got this Palestinian scumbag. He's been leading a lot of these protests,
mhm.
and Tom's like, "You're not even a citizen. You're out of here." He's on the next plane. Hopefully, they just drop him out over Gaza and find out whether the shoot worked. Um, but I would say something. Knowing a lot of folks in the NYPD, the problem is the university. The cops would be delighted to go in and clear them out and break heads. Give me the go ahead. Fine. So the university has prevented this. So anytime Columbia's saying, well, we'd like to do it, but the police have been slow, lie, 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 lie. NYPD would be delighted to clear these dirtbags off the campus in 10 minutes with fire hoses, dogs, and clubs. No question about it. And they haven't been allowed to.
Well, let me just add to that, which is last year when a large group of students at Columbia, I believe, not Barnard, took over a school building and
Oh yeah, that was
held
great.
someone hostage. People were arrested, but they were not prosecuted. I don't think
Nope.
anyone was prosecuted, either because nobody really wants to prosecute crime anymore. And a lot of the people, I guess, couldn't be identified because they were masked, and so couldn't
You
couldn't
get a
be.
hold of them, you do this.
Yeah,
Crazy.
yeah,
Yeah, no,
it's
it's crazy.
pretty
It's absolutely
outrageous.
insane that they've allowed this to happen. Um, and aided and abetted by the left around the world, and especially in America. The American left is hell bent on two things, which are intertwined: destroying the Second Amendment and destroying the First Amendment. First Amendment is lovely; it doesn't mean much without the Second. And their whole goal is to disarm the population. Kathy Hochul is basically giving two middle fingers to the Supreme Court that said New York's restrictions on gun ownership are frankly unconstitutional. They turned around and said, well, you can have a gun. Of course you can have a gun. But you can't be within 9 miles of a school. You can't be in 40 miles of a kindergarten. It's absurdity, which means you just can't have one. So they're going through the process. But like Kathy Hochul and all these Democrats who are themselves protected by armed men constantly don't want people to be armed. Can you imagine how different Crown Heights would have looked 3 weeks ago? First off, those cowardly Kafia pussies would not have gone to Crown Heights if they knew everyone were armed. They don't do that in Florida. They don't do it in Georgia. They don't do it anywhere where people are armed. You don't run up into my neighborhood and start screaming death to the Jews because they're going to be washing your blood off the streets in tomorrow morning. So I don't know what is wrong with American Democrats. They hate this country so badly. I really don't. I just don't get it. Why they don't want normal moral people to be armed when only the criminals are. Because the police are minutes away when seconds matter, and they don't care. They just don't care.
Well, it's not only New York. In New Jersey, in the suburb of New Jersey, where my daughter lives with my son-in-law and their 3 kids, it's a Jewish area, and the pro-terror supporters took to the residential streets of that neighborhood, right in front of their house, and she had to. They were pulling into their driveway, and each parent took a kid. There were 2 kids in the car, and ran into the house. They had to run into the house.
Crazy.
They were right in front of their house screaming. So I don't understand why that's allowed. They don't need to be on residential streets in front of people's houses. They could be.
They don't need to be anywhere. They need to be deported back to Gaza because they love it so much, and they need to be shot. Period. I mean, really, they're calling for our deaths. That's not free speech in this country. You're not allowed to exhort people to violence. Just not. It's illegal. And yet, Democrats don't enforce the law. Democrat Merrick Garland did not enforce the law. There is a law. You are not allowed to protest in front of a government official's house or a Supreme Court justice's house. They paraded around in front of Kavanaugh and other right-wing Supreme Court justice homes that were doxxed. By the law, every one of those people should have been sent to jail for 20 years. Nothing happened to them. Nothing.
Right. It's
The
really
Democrats hate Jews, and I don't know what it's going to take for my family members, friends, and other left-wing nutcase New Yorkers that I've grown up with my whole life to wake up to the fact the Democrat Party hates Jews. Jesse Hymietown Jackson drove Democrat policy. The top 3 members of the Democrat Party love Louis Farrakhan. There's a picture of Farrakhan, Obama, and Sharpton grinning ear to ear that the Chicago Defender hid until after his 8 years in office. I don't know what it's going to take. It just drives me out of my mind. Be an independent if you don't like Republicans. The Democrats hate you and want you dead and love Palestinians who kill you. All of my fellow Jewish Democrats. It blows my mind.
Well, whatever party the Jews belong to, I think the focus really has to be on saving ourselves and advocating for our family in Israel. They are, my daughter is a psychologist, keep bringing her up. And she recently published a column in her local Jewish newspaper about inherited trauma. And I think that's a big part for me, I think that's something that affected me, which is strange because my family didn't lose anyone close at all in the Holocaust. But I guess if you go back hundreds of years, probably down the line, my ancestors were persecuted in pogroms and possibly killed. Who knows? So she said, why there are some of us Jews who had a really strong reaction to October 7th and haven't really gotten over it. I have not gotten over it. And followed by the terrible anti-Semitism that erupted and the lack of support and the fighting against Israel, just trying to survive. That takes a real emotional toll. And I think that there are lots of Jews who are feeling the same way, but not everybody. And those who are feeling this way need to speak up and need to do whatever they can do, but
Loudly.
many do not, for a variety of reasons. And I don't like to judge, but I will. So because this is really
This is existential, and people who don't understand that, I'm worried about my job. Your job isn't going to be here if you're dead.
right. It's not business as
People
usual.
want to kill us. That's what they want to do. And the best part is they say so. You don't have to read between the lines.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So yeah.
That's great idea. Is there, first off, I one of the truth is the first casualty of war, and probably politics too, right? The weirdest thing, as I've said to all the people who hate Donald Trump, there are dozens of rational reasons I can find for you not to like Donald Trump. Okay? You don't have to invent new ones. My favorite is Donald Trump hates Jews. Most fascinating fabrication I've yet to hear in a lifetime in U.S. politics, right? There's a lot of things people could not like about Donald. Rationally, irrationally, I'm not going to argue, don't care. The dumbest one is Donald Trump hates Jews. Right. This is a man who's never met a camera he didn't put his face in front of. His entire career is in New York, chock full of Jews. I always, when I have a calm moment with especially professional Democrats in politics, I just ask them, I'm not here to argue anything. I'm here to ask you this. How can an attention whore like Donald Trump, who's now in his 70s, in New York, in an industry chock full of Jewish people, employing Jewish people, working with Jewish people, you can't find one person to come forward and give you a story about how Donald Trump hates Jews. You can't find one. So where does this phantasm come from? It's bizarre. It is just, the left has perfected, and they did this back to Trotsky and Lenin and Marx, and they chose this as a tactic. Lie, 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 lie. Just keep lying, and eventually people think it's the truth. But this particular one I've always found absolutely baffling. And so when Donald had this scumbag Palestinian arrested in Colombia and Homan's deporting him, for all I know, he was on a plane out of here, and said, here, take $400 million, bye-bye. I called him and said, you still think Donald hates Jews? He's doing this because they're not protecting Jewish students. Like, have you yet come up with the example of how Donald doesn't like Jews? I'd like to know. Nothing. Crickets. It's just it's a reality distortion field when you move to the left of the political spectrum. And I don't know, does it take us getting invaded physically as a country? I don't know what it takes. You're in New York City. They're chanting for your death. And you're still like, man, but the poor Palestinian kids. What? Anywhere else in America, there are other wars going on around the world. Does anyone go to the neighborhoods of people ethnically affiliated with that war and threaten them? Nowhere else in the world does this happen to anyone else.
Well, I do not believe Donald Trump hates Jews or is anti-Semitic, and you can see that he's very moved by the plight of the hostages. You can see he's personally moved. However, I will say that we're getting it from all sides, the Jews. There is this concept of far-right anti-Semitism, the Candace Owenses of the world, and this horrible creature, Andrew Tate, who I never even heard of until he went to Canada, maybe, or Florida. He went to Florida. Bizarre. Yeah.
But I'm gonna, you know what? In editing this, we'll have the discussion. I'm taking his name now. This low-rent ghetto scum Brit dirtbag rapist. I'm not giving any more airtime to. But go ahead. The type of person that.
Yeah. So I mean, that is there are some really, really horrible far-right prominent politicians and personalities out there. So it's not that I think there's, that the right is worse than the left or the left is worse than the right. I just think that Jews are in danger, period. We're in danger. And this is our generation's thing that we have to deal with. Like when you say, oh, no, it can never happen here. I think this is it. And it's not a Holocaust, but I don't know where it's going to end. And I think that we need to take things seriously. In fact, I say it's not a Holocaust, but when you think about the hostages, what they're going through, it's not 6 million people, but we're talking about extreme inhuman treatment. These people
Insane.
are
Evil.
not going to have normal lives
No.
when they come out. It's just beyond anything I could ever imagine. So that's going on,
Yep.
and we're letting it go on. We're not storming the White House every day. I was just reading a piece about Morgenthau and how rabbis from Europe who escaped, some very Hasidic rabbis, or I don't know if they were Hasidic, they were very very Orthodox rabbis, had escaped, and
Yep.
they were taken to Morgenthau to plead that for help. In this case, I think it was I think there was a ransom being demanded, and there was some chance of ransoming some Jews for some money that was raised.
Right.
And they just browbeat Morgenthau until he went to the president, Roosevelt, and obtained his assistance. Now, I'll tell you, even back then, it was kind of too little too late when you think about it. Until the American Jews and escapees, refugees, it was like late 1943 before they started pounding, the doors of the White House, and finally the Refugee Board was formed. And so, we're kind of experiencing something similar. I asked my grandmother about it many, many years ago when she was alive, and I said, "What were you doing? What were the American Jews thinking?" And she said, "We didn't know." She said, "We didn't know." Well, we know. I don't know if she knew or not, but we know.
Yeah, we do, and it's. I have my own theories about what's going to happen once the last hostage, dead and alive, is returned, and I don't think the Fakestinians are going to like it much, and I don't think there are going to be many of them left afterwards. So the Israelis are releasing lots of people from prisons, like, shh, we know where we're sending you. Great, yeah, you're out. Congratulations. Right. You think we're going to do the Sinwar bullshit again and let you live? So all hail the pagers. I think they're all trying desperately to figure out what to do. We allowed them to build this horrible infrastructure. They UN paid for it. The reckoning which is coming in a range of ways is going to be pretty impressive, I think. The Red Cross, there are a lot of officials of the Red Cross I don't think are going to see 5 years from now, and many of them are going to be in a prison. It's the only time in history they have not gone to visit hostages or prisoners in any war, anywhere, ever.
Well, could they?
And when the the Israeli families confronted them, they basically told the Israeli families to shut up because the kids in Gaza are suffering. It is insanity, utter insanity. So.
But do you think they would have been, if they tried, assuming they didn't try, do you think Hamas would ever have allowed them to visit the hostages?
Yes, they're good, cozy buddies. Of course they would have. They're all pals. You see them talking on the handoff. These are not strangers. So, when confronted with an evil this all-pervasive in a poisoned society who have done nothing but spend their time trying to kill Jews, killing Jews, teaching the kids to kill Jews, and then as Israel got more powerful, backed by the U.S., to go on to encourage them to become shaheed, dying while trying to kill Jews. It's a sick, sick society. And at the end of the Nazi era in Germany, which was only for a generation, right? We spent, I don't know how many years re-educating German men between 13 and 40, where they sat in classes and were told by the Führer was an asshole and lied to you. And if you disagreed, they had a very simple pedagogical method where an American master sergeant would bring you out of the hallway, beat you senseless, tie you back in your chair until you woke up again to hear why the Führer was an asshole. It worked. It worked really well. And that was one generation and Europeans who shared some kind of culture. I don't think most Americans understand the depth of the difference between Arab Islamist culture, such as it is, this pox, and how Westerners look at the world. They just don't get it. They just don't get it. And a big chunk of, I think, the liberal naivete, why Lenin called them useful idiots, is they're so divorced from reality. They've never experienced people like this. They never lived in places like this. They just don't know. And so they're thinking that, well, they're just like us, but they've got a different opinion. No, these evil, poisoned people are not just like us. They do not have a different opinion. They're rotten to the core. I just don't know. Like, they're everyone around them. Trump suggested, let's take over Gaza. We'll rebuild it. Big, beautiful buildings. Let's take over Gaza. And all the people there will temporarily relocate them. Silence from the Arab world. They don't want them. Every time these scumbags have appeared in their countries, Lebanon, Beirut was the Paris of the Middle East in the 50s. They went to Lebanon, immediately started killing Christians and everyone else, and killing moderate Muslims, and they turned it into a hellhole. The Jordanians took them in. Within, 18 months, they killed 300,000 of them because they're so awful. Syria took them in. Bashar al-Assad put up with their bullshit for 8 months before he put them into a neighborhood in Damascus, walled it off, starved them to death, and then carpet bombed it. Like, they're awful people. It's a weird thing to say, but they're awful people. And right now in Egypt, if we get the Egyptian contractor who built the wall between Gaza and Egypt to come build our southern border, not a Mexican cricket we get across it. So I don't know what the solution is to this all-pervasive, unending hatred, but it's going to take a long time. And the horror is, as Rabbi Sachs wrote so beautifully, Jew hatred can't be solved by Jews. It's got to be solved by the people with the sickness. And first off, they've got to want to solve it. The Fakestinians show no interest in solving their Jew hatred problem. Quite the contrary. They're very happy with it still. But a generation there has to come up who eschews the insanity of their people and changes it. I'm not particularly optimistic.
Well, you have good reason not to be optimistic, because I guess it's a combination of there really are just a handful of real peace activists that I know of among the Palestinians. There may be people who are just scared. I mean, they're living under a violent totalitarian regime. So I think you hit it when you were talking about the re-education of the Nazis. They need to be re-educated. I mean, they need to be given a chance to live normally by not being brainwashed from basically from preschool.
Going back to the 1830s.
Mm-hmm.
It's generations. You got to tell people everything your father, your grandfather believed was a lie. It's a tough sell. People don't like to hear that.
I know. It's definitely got to be traumatic, but if it's done correctly, and I'm certainly no expert, eventually, certainly the younger generation is going to start to think, hopefully, and want to actually have lives. And one of the things that occurred to me, that I'm wondering, how could anyone kill these two babies with their bare hands? And I realized I'm not the first to say this, but it hit home for me that they don't think we're humans. They have dehumanized us, because there's no way you could do it otherwise. So they have a long way to go in terms of accepting that Israel is going to remain. I think that they actually believe in that they're going to come back and take over.
They fully believe that they're just going to wait it out.
Yeah.
And that the Western conqueror, insanely enough, they believe. And the never-ending lies just go on and on and on, right? To the extent that, no, the Temple Mount wasn't built by Jews. We've been here forever. I mean, their own Quran tells
Right.
them their timeline is wrong. Irrelevant. Irrelevant. The Muslims have been here for 90 bazillion years. It's just
Well, they say whatever they want. I mean,
say whatever they
a lot of
want.
that
So
was just
it's
an
it's the
editorial
main thing
comment.
I've found so most poignant and difficult is that it's not only Jews, but Jews tend to believe in sort of the I hate to use progressive because it's the wrong it's a loaded phrase. Believe that education is always the answer. That if
Hmm.
you only really understood it, there's no answer. That's not an answer. It doesn't mean anything, right? There were eloquent Nazis with 3 PhDs who spoke 4 languages who happily threw children into ovens. So it's not education, right?
It's not education
Um,
per se.
not education. And so we think that if we have a better argument, and I discovered that because I get a lot of delightful amounts of hatred on with the writing I do on Substack and elsewhere. And I've got this essay I just have on link, and I send it to them once and then mute them. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to debate with Jew haters. I don't care. I'm not interested. I answer once only for people who might be reading the exchange. That's it. Once. I'm not here to debate some idiot. My favorite thing of these troglodytes is universally it's some moron who's never left his or her hometown in America who tells me I need to educate myself. At
Oh,
which point I usually answer them in Arabic. Like I've done Sharia finance in the Gulf. I've been published on Sharia finance. I've worked in Saudi. I know the culture. I've lived there, studied the history, and know the languages, some better than others. And I love it when some idiot tells me I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't argue because I don't care. I
right.
don't. I don't care what they have to say. I respond once for those who will be watching, and then I mute them. I don't block them because I'd like them to read something. Maybe I'll one day wander through their thick skulls. I doubt it, but um, it is the one thing which is such a betrayal of, and it's not just Jews, it's a lot of Western civilization. The Enlightenment was based on greater knowledge will lead to better decisions. That has proved to be radically untrue.
Right. It's
Radically untrue. As you mentioned, some scumbag thug from England has got a lot of following. Um, yeah, I mean, am I amazed that some, fast talking gutter trash who sounds like he came out of a Guy Ritchie movie who is draping himself in pretty girls gets the attention of dumb young men? No, I'm not surprised. Not surprised at all, right? Hopefully they'll grow up and they'll ignore this twit. But does he have some cultural currency now? Yeah, he does. Nothing new,
yeah.
sadly. But wrap it up, just because I know you've got other things to do with your life than complain about the
Really?
horribleness. What are you suggesting? You're in New York, so you're seeing this a lot more close to hand than I. Like, what are you suggesting to people who are either not speaking up? They're what is your suggestion? Because as you said, if we're all banging on the doors of the White House, maybe something would be changing. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts about how we best proactively defend this community, along with the frankly majority of Americans who are with us?
Right.
They're not chanting "Yay!" Thank God for the evangelical Christians. Are Israel's and the Jews' best friend?
Hmm.
Take it. Great, wonderful. Thank you. What are your thoughts?
So I think that people need to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. And I have non-Jewish friends who also tell me privately, oh, of course you're right. But look, do I go take to social media about Sudan? No. So it's hard to criticize. But for Jews, I think it's important to get out of your comfort zone. And in this day and age, social media is very important. And talking about this on social media, it's not the only thing that you can do, but it's something. I think it makes a difference. I think there are so many voices against the Jews on social media, and we have some great spokespeople, and there are plenty of us out there, but it's not enough, and we need to make louder noise. Now, in addition to that, I mean, I really think that's what people should do. It's some people are really, really reluctant and just are not going to put themselves out there for a variety of reasons. Either they're, they don't want to be associated with anything political, in social media, or they have some embarrassment, or they think that it will affect them professionally or in some way. But, we really have to put that aside for now. Because if everybody was speaking up, I think the world would know that this time is different. We really have to pay attention. There are other things you can do. You can attend hostage rallies or other rallies. You can write to your elected officials. You can write to the universities. I'm on a WhatsApp group of people who every day I'm not doing it full disclosure, but they're writing to universities, theaters, hospitals. Every day they're out there writing to them and making demands that someone or other be removed because of their outspoken Jew hatred. And I think that's making a difference. So lots of things people can do if they don't want to be on social media. You just have to look.
Get active. Talk to someone who can do something.
Right.
There's an old saying on Wall Street: when you're closing a deal, you're trying to get past someone to the decision maker. Never, ever, ever take no from someone who can't say yes.
That's brilliant, by the way. I'm a lawyer, so
one of the greatest things I ever learned, because I remember I had a boss, the first and only big bank I ever worked at. And I made some comment like, I'm having trouble getting to X, or these secretaries blocking me. He said, work it out. Never take no from someone who can't say yes.
You got to get
and the solution was simple. I called him at 6:30 at night. Secretary was gone. He picked up the phone. And we got it done. So there you go. I had a bunch of kids, just totally separately, on a much lighter note. The university nearby asked me to come speak at their investment club. I've been busy, and I respond back. And to the kid's credit, he's followed up like 3 times for every time I've ignored him. And I wrote back, A, I can find time next month, and B, you're already doing it. The first rule on Wall Street is make the call.
Right.
People with the money aren't going to call you. That's not how that works.
Definitely not. Definitely
They're
not.
not calling you. You call them.
Yeah.
Remember, whoever's selling is picking up the phone.
Right. Exactly. That's a tough lesson, because that's another way you have to get out of your comfort zone when you're trying to sell or pitch. Got to put yourself out there.
You're selling the fact that an American Jewish kid should not be held under Gaza by a pack of unhuman savages. And that, yes, we deserve to kill all of them, but that's frankly probably not going to get him back. So we need to get him back first and then kill all of them. That's the message I send to the White House on a near daily basis. I think they're getting tired of hearing from me. But Dena, thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.
Hopefully we'll have a follow-up with much more positive news to relate.
I hope so.
Until then, as I tell all my listeners, please save yourself the brain pain, turn off the mainstream media who are lying to you, and tune into Messy Times.
Okay. Thank you so much.